Marcus Raines walked into Pinewood Elementary's cafeteria at 1:17 on a Tuesday afternoon. Hell's Angels vest over a gray work shirt, 6'2", 238 pounds, expecting to grab a forgotten jacket and get back to the transmission, waiting in Bay 3. He'd left his tools on the lift. He had 4 diagnostics scheduled before close. He had rent due Friday and exactly $1,847 in his checking account and a work schedule that didn't bend easily. He found her sitting alone at table 14. Pink hoodie 3 sizes too large, rolled at the cuffs the way children roll things when they're trying to hold themselves together. One hand tucked under the table, the other picking at a bread roll she hadn't eaten. Emma Sullivan, 8 years old. Birdie he called her because when she was 3, she'd climb onto his shoulders and sing made-up songs about flying, and Margaret had laughed and said their girl was a little bird, always reaching for higher branches. Margaret, who'd been gone 18 months now. Cancer that moved faster than hope. Marcus crossed the cafeteria slowly. Not because he was uncertain, because he'd learned in 14 months of supervised visits in family court hearings that a man his size wearing a Hell's Angels patch had to move carefully around children who weren't his own, had to make himself readable, had to prove he wasn't the threat the system assumed he was. He passed 2 tables, saw Emma's shoulders come forward slightly when she noticed him, saw her push that hidden hand further under the table before she smiled, gap-toothed, careful, the kind of smile that's learned not to expect much. "Uncle Marcus, you're early." He stopped beside her chair, looked at the bread roll on her tray, untouched, looked at the small carton of milk beside it, half empty, looked at the steam line 30 feet away where 340 children were eating pizza and French fries and fruit cups, while the cafeteria filled with the sounds of scraping chairs and laughter and the specific chaos of a school lunch period that was running exactly as designed. He looked at the banner above table 14. Vinyl, professionally printed colors, bright and encouraging. "Every student matters. Came to check on you," he said quietly. She glanced toward the lunch line, toward a woman in a hairnet and a lanyard, Carol Weaver, cafeteria supervisor, who was watching them now with the specific attention of someone whose job involved monitoring children who sat at the edges of rooms. Emma's voice dropped lower. "I'm okay." Marcus had heard his daughter say those exact words 3 years ago in a supervised visitation room when she was trying to make things easier for him. When she'd been 5 years old and caught between her father and a mother who decided that a biker couldn't be a safe parent. When she'd understood that her comfort cost him something and had learned to swallow her needs to protect his feelings. He'd known it was a lie then. He knew it was a lie now. He reached out slowly, checking her eyes first, and took her right hand gently in both of his. She resisted for half a second, then let him turn it over. The stamp was still damp. Red block letters across her small knuckles pressed hard enough that the ridges of bone showed through the ink. Lunch debt. Marcus looked at that stamp for 4 full seconds without speaking, without looking away, without letting his face show what was building in his chest like something with teeth. He'd fought for this child. 14 months of legal fees he couldn't afford, and character witnesses who had to explain why a Hell's Angels member could be trusted with an 8-year-old girl whose mother had died without a will. 14 months of proving he had stable housing and steady income and a clean record, and references from employers and neighbors, and the VA counselor who'd helped him process what he'd brought home from 2 deployments that the Army didn't talk about anymore. 14 months of standing in front of judges who looked at his vest instead of his parenting. And he'd won, barely. By margins so thin, he still woke up some nights convinced they'd take her back. He'd won because he'd convinced them he could protect her. And now someone had stamped debt onto her skin like she was inventory. "Birdie," he said quietly. His voice was steady, carefully steady. "How long has this been happening?" She blinked fast, jaw tight. The specific control of a child who'd gotten very good at not crying in public places. Since February. It was April 9th. That was 22 school days, give or take. 22 days of sitting in this cafeteria while everyone else ate hot meals. "Mrs. Weaver stamps us in the lunch line if our account is red." Us, plural. Marcus scanned the cafeteria with the trained observation of someone who'd spent 19 years riding with brothers who noticed things, who read rooms, who understood that danger often looked like nothing until you knew what you were seeing. 17 children scattered at edge tables, near the recycling bins, near the windows, near the walls. 17 children eating bread rolls and milk while the steam line hissed and served, and the banner above them promised that every student mattered. "I didn't tell you," Emma whispered, "because you already paid. Twice. I didn't want you to be upset." Marcus's jaw tightened. His hand stayed gentle around hers. He had paid $67 through the district portal. He had confirmation emails on his phone right now, two of them, dated March 4th and March 18th. "Last Friday she took my tray away," Emma continued. Her voice was so quiet he had to lean closer. "In the line, in front of everyone. She said I knew the rules." Carol Weaver was walking toward them now. Mid-40s, sensible shoes, the specific exhaustion of someone who'd worked this cafeteria for 6 years and had learned that there were rules and there were people who asked about the rules, and the people who asked rarely understood how the rules worked. "Sir, visiting hours require—" "I'm her guardian." Marcus didn't stand, didn't raise his voice, just looked at this woman who'd stamped his niece like she was a problem instead of a child. "And I'm looking at a stamp on her hand that says she owes money I already paid. Twice." Carol's expression didn't shift. Professional. Practiced. "The system shows a balance of $67. If payments were submitted, they would have been applied. The lunch debt notification is simply a communication tool, not a punishment. She's 8 years old and you stamp debt on her skin. She's eating. She has milk and bread. That's a complete snack according to USDA guidelines." Marcus stood slowly. He was careful not to move fast, careful not to do anything that could be called aggressive, careful the way he'd learned to be in courtrooms and supervise visits and every interaction where someone was looking for a reason to prove he was exactly what they assumed. Carol Weaver took half a step back anyway. "A bread roll and a milk carton," he said quietly, "is not a complete snack when there's pizza 30 feet away that federal money is paying for. I made 2 payments. I have confirmation emails. You want to explain to me where that money went? You'll need to contact the district payment support line. I don't have access to—" "I did contact them 3 weeks ago. They gave me a form that takes 30 days to process." "Then that's the process we have. If you have concerns, the front office—" Emma's hand tightened around Marcus's. He looked down at her, at the gap between her front teeth that she used to show when she smiled widely and didn't anymore, at the dark circles under her eyes that came from a body that wasn't sleeping deeply because it wasn't getting enough to sleep on, at the spelling bee trophy she kept in her backpack's front pocket because home had changed twice in 18 months, and things got lost, but the trophy was proof that she'd once been a child a room had applauded. 22 days. While he'd called the payment support line, while he'd filled out forms, while the system designed to move slowly had moved exactly as designed. "Bertie," he said quietly, "did you tell anyone this was happening?" She nodded. "Who?" "Miss Aldridge, my teacher. She filed something, and Miss Ferris, the counselor, she called you." "What happened?" "Nothing. Miss Aldridge got reminded at a staff meeting that nutrition concerns go through the cafeteria, not teachers. And Miss Ferris sent a message to the office, but they said you had to use the portal." Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. Text from Dale, his foreman, asking where he was. 4 diagnostics waiting. The transmission on the lift. The schedule that didn't bend. He looked at Carol Weaver, at the parent volunteer at the trash station who'd seen the stamp and turned her back, at the front office visible through the cafeteria's glass doors where a secretary was answering phones and processing the 3-page complaint form that required notarization and took 30 business days to review. 30 business days that would close exactly 4 days after the annual federal audit period ended. He pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Emma asked. "Calling someone who answers." And the line rang twice. "War Chief?" Marcus's voice was very quiet, very steady. "It's Tombstone. I'm at Bertie's school. I need you to see something." There was a pause on the other end. Not hesitation, calculation. Gideon War Chief Cole had led 3 missing child searches that police had abandoned, had ridden with the North Carolina chapter for 19 years, had learned a long time ago that the fastest way to lose a child was to move slowly. "Talk to me." How fast can you get to Pinewood Elementary, Holly Springs? Another pause. Longer. The sound of a door closing. Voices in the background fading. 30 minutes. What am I walking into? A cafeteria full of kids eating lunch. 17 of them with debt stamped on their hands. Eating bread while everyone else eats hot meals. My niece hasn't had a hot lunch in 22 days. I paid twice. Money disappeared. System says 30-day review. The audit window closes in 11 days. Silence on the line. 3 seconds of it. Then War Chief's voice dropped lower, quieter. The tone Marcus had heard twice before when brothers had gone missing and nobody was sleeping until they came home. How many adults are aware? Teachers filed reports, got shut down, counselor escalated, got redirected to a complaint form that won't be reviewed before the audit period ends. School board member toured the building this morning. Told a parent that complaints aren't their lane. Tombstone. Yeah. How many kids? 17. The line went quiet again. Marcus heard footsteps, heard another door open, heard War Chief's voice speaking to someone else, muffled, urgent. Then he came back. I'm making calls. Don't leave that building. Do not engage further. Just stay with her until I get there. Understood. Understood. And Tombstone, document everything. Take photos of that stamp. Get names of the other kids if you can without making it worse. We're going to need evidence. The line went dead. Marcus looked at Emma. She was watching him with the specific caution of a child who'd seen adults get upset on her behalf before and had watched nothing change. The upset had cost them. She'd absorbed the cost. Uncle Marcus, what did you do? He knelt again, eye level. I called family. They're coming to help. Are you going to get in trouble? No, baby, but some other people are. She pulled something from her hoodie pocket, a piece of notebook paper folded small, worn soft at the creases from being carried. She unfolded it slowly, her handwriting. Careful, shaky in places. Purple gel pen, the kind Margaret used to buy her in packs of 12. 30 days in the 19th in Wake County, and it doesn't exist, and he said your name. Marcus read it twice. What is this? 3 weeks ago, I forgot my jacket after school and came back to get it. The principal's office door was open. He was talking to Mrs. Weaver and a lady from the district. I heard them say your name and something about 30 days in the 19th in Wake County and something that doesn't exist. I didn't understand, but I wrote it down. Marcus's hands were shaking. Not rage, not yet. Something colder, sharper. Bertie, did the principal, his name's Mr. Kemp, right? She nodded. Did he see you? No, I left. But Uncle Marcus, I heard the lady from the district say families requalify and he said not to reprocess them. And Mrs. Weaver said you were going to come in and he said to send you the complaint form. And it takes 30 days and the audit closes on the 19th. Marcus looked at the note, at the words an 8-year-old had written in purple gel pen because she didn't understand them, but trusted him enough to bring them anyway. At the date written at the top in her careful print. 3 weeks ago, 2 days before he'd called the district support line and been told there was a process. 1 day before Miss Ferris had escalated his complaint to the office and been handed the same 30-day form. He stood, pulled out his phone, took a photo of Emma's hand with the stamp still wet at the edges, took a photo of her tray, bread roll milk carton, nothing else, took a photo of the banner above her table, every student matters. Then he walked to the other 16 children. He moved slowly, deliberately, kept his voice gentle. Some of them recognized his vest. A few pulled back. One little boy, maybe 6 years old, showed his hand without being asked. Mister, you a good guy or a bad guy? Marcus crouched. A good guy. You gonna fix this? Yeah, buddy, I'm gonna fix this. By the time he returned to table 14, Carol Weaver had called the front office. By the time he sat back down beside Emma, the school secretary was on the phone with the principal. By the time the first Harley engine rumbled into the school parking lot 28 minutes later, Randall Kemp was walking toward the cafeteria with a practiced expression of patient concern and absolutely no idea that the man in the vest he was about to dismiss had just triggered the largest single-purpose biker mobilization Wake County had seen in 11 years. Gideon War Chief Cole was 61 years old, had been riding with Hell's Angels North Carolina chapter for 19 years, and had learned a long time ago that the fastest way to lose a child was to move slowly. He'd been in a strategy meeting in Garner, 16 brothers discussing a charity poker run for the children's hospital, dividing responsibilities. Routes vendors permits the thousand small details that made the difference between an event that raised $20,000 and one that raised 50. Then Tombstone's call came through. War Chief closed the meeting in 4 sentences. Brothers, child in immediate need, Holly Springs. Every available rider meets at the town hall in 45 minutes. Move. No vote, no debate. Tank grabbed his vest from the back of his chair. Steele checked his phone for the address. Reaper was out the door before War Chief finished speaking. Within 7 minutes, the first calls went out to the Durham chapter. Within 12, a rider from Fayetteville, whose daughter had been identified in Tombstone's list of 17, was pulling onto Interstate 40 southbound, doing 80 and a 70, and didn't care. War Chief made 5 calls in his truck, 3 to chapter sergeants at arms, 1 to Razorback, a former Wake County school board attorney who'd left after being asked to overlook a contract irregularity he wouldn't sign off on, who'd spent the intervening 3 years wondering if walking away had been the right choice, who'd stopped wondering the moment War Chief said 17 children. 1, to Gravel, a former North Carolina DSS child welfare investigator who knew exactly which forms to file, with which supervisors to unseal a settled school complaint, and had once spent 14 hours in a district records office until they gave him what he needed because a 6-year-old girl's safety had mattered more than his comfort. Gravel, it's War Chief. I need you at Holly Springs Town Hall in 1 hour with everything you know about federal school lunch fraud, sealed district settlements, and how to request a USD, a Office of Inspector General referral. What happened? 17 kids denied hot meals while a principal collects federal funding. 2 parents tried to pay. Money disappeared. Systems running a 30-day review that closes 4 days after the audit window. And there's a sealed Wake County settlement with a principal's name attached that nobody at the new district knows about. Gravel swore quietly. Fuquay Varina Elementary. I remember that case. Mororo family. Kid was malnourished. Parents said the school lunch policy did it. District paid out $163,900 and sealed everything. Principal transferred under a mutual development agreement. That principal at Pinewood now, if it's Randall Kemp, yes. Then we're unsealing it. 1 hour town hall. The line went dead. War Chief drove the speed limit, hands steady on the wheel. Mine already working through the next 12 hours like a chess game, where 17 children were the pieces someone else had decided didn't matter. The brothers arrived in waves. First 16 by 1:47 in the afternoon. Engines cutting off in sequence as they pulled into the public parking lot across from Pinewood Elementary. Not the school lot, not blocking access, not giving anyone a reason to call this anything other than what it was. Lawful assembly, public property, peaceful intent, another 23 by 210. By 3 in the afternoon, 62 motorcycles lined the parking lot in perfect formation. Chrome gleaming, engines silent, leather cuts bearing the same insignia, the same chapter markings, the same commitment that had brought them here on a Tuesday afternoon, when most of them had jobs and families and lives that didn't pause easily. They didn't block the school entrance, didn't rev engines, didn't shout. They just stood there, visible, present, waiting. War Chief walked across the street to the school entrance at 3:14. 6 brothers flanked him, not as muscle, as witnesses. Razorback carried a leather document folder. Gravel carried a tablet with the NSLP federal program guidelines pulled up. A younger brother named Halftone, a freelance documentary filmmaker with press credentials from 3 regional news outlets, carried a camera on his shoulder. The school receptionist looked up as 7 men in Hells Angels vests walked through the doors. Her hand moved toward the phone. War Chief spoke before she could lift the receiver. Ma'am, my name is Gideon Cole. I'm here to speak with Principal Kemp regarding a federal nutrition program concern involving 17 students and 2 unprocessed payments totaling $67. This is not a threat. This is documentation. May I wait here until he's available? She blinked, looked at the vests, at the camera, at Razorback's folder. I need to call him. That's fine, we'll wait. They stood in the front lobby, not crowding the desk, not blocking the hallway, just standing in a line that was somehow both casual and absolutely deliberate. Razorback set the folder on the receptionist's desk, not aggressive, just present. Gravel opened his tablet and began taking notes. Timestamps. Who was in the building? Who walked past? What they said. Halftone positioned his camera to capture the front office. Not invasively, just there, recording. Making sure that whatever happened next happened on record. A parent walking through the doors saw them froze, then hurried past with her child's hand gripped tight. The receptionist made the call. Her voice was very quiet. Mr. Kemp, there are 7 men here. They say they need to speak with you about lunch accounts. 60 seconds later, Randall Kemp walked into the lobby. He was 5'10" trim, wearing khakis and an Oxford shirt with the sleeves rolled precisely to mid-forearm. His hair was side-parted, beginning to silver at the temples in the specific way that made him look distinguished instead of old. He had the build of someone who ran 3 times a week and the posture of someone who'd stood in front of school boards and parent groups in grant review committees and knew how to hold a room. He looked at the vests. He looked at Halftone's camera. His expression shifted, not to fear, to calculation. Gentlemen, I'm Principal Kemp. How can I help you? War Chief extended his hand. Kemp shook it. Firm, professional. A man who'd shaken a lot of hands at a lot of PTA meetings and knew how to make it look natural. Mr. Kemp, I'm here because one of your students, Emma Sullivan, has been denied hot meals for 22 school days, despite her guardian submitting 2 confirmed payments through the district portal. We've identified 16 additional students in the same situation. We'd like to understand why. Kemp's smile didn't waver. I appreciate your concern. Student nutrition accounts are managed through the district's central office. If there's a payment processing issue, the guardian needs to contact the support line. He did, 3 weeks ago. He was given a form that requires notarization and a 30-day review period. The federal audit window closes in 11 days, meaning any complaint filed today won't be reviewed before the audit period ends. Kemp's smile tightened fractionally. I don't control the district's complaint timeline. That's a board policy. Razorback stepped forward, opened the folder, pulled out a printed document. A board policy you recommended 2 years ago. You submitted a suggested revision to the grievance processing timeline, extending the review window from 14 days to 30. The board adopted it without revision. That 30-day window aligns precisely with the annual federal audit period, meaning no parent complaint processed during the final month of the school year will be reviewed before the audit closes. Kemp looked at the document. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes recalculated. I suggested that revision to ensure thorough review, not to delay anything. And then why, Gravel said quietly, does your cafeteria supervisor report that you instructed her not to accept payment corrections at the lunch line, but to direct all parents to the district portal and the complaint form? Where did you hear that? Mrs. Carol Weaver. She's been very cooperative. Kemp's jaw tightened. If you're recording this conversation without my consent, we're not recording anything, War Chief said. We're asking questions and documenting your answers, which is legal, public, and protected. Now, you mentioned the district's central office manages accounts. That's true, but you as principal control which families receive notification of their eligibility for the National School Lunch Program. Free and reduced price meals, federally funded. You're the institutional point of contact. So I'm asking directly, how many eligible families at this school have not been notified of the program? Silence. Mr. Kemp, how many NSLP applications have been submitted to your office in the past 2 years that were never processed? Kemp's hands were very still at his sides. That's a district-level data question. I don't have those numbers readily available. 47, Gravel said flatly. 47 families report submitting applications that don't appear in the district's system. We pulled public enrollment data, cross-referenced it against state-free and reduced price meal eligibility guidelines. Your school should have at least 63 more students enrolled in NSLP than currently are, which means either your school has the wealthiest low-income population in Wake County or someone is suppressing applications. Kemp's face went very still. That's a serious accusation. It's a question, and I've answered it. If applications are missing, that's a clerical error at the district level. I don't personally process, But you do personally approve infrastructure grant applications, Razorback said. 3 in the past 2 years, all citing a documented lunch funding, gap, and emergency cafeteria equipment needs. All awarded to Cornerstone Kitchen Solutions, Holly Springs, owned and operated by Darren Kemp, your brother-in-law. The lobby went very quiet. A teacher walked past, stopped, looked at the 7 men in vests, looked at Kemp, kept walking. Kemp's voice stayed level, calm. Cornerstone was awarded those contracts through a competitive bidding process managed by the district. I recused myself from the vendor selection. You recused yourself from the selection, Razorback said. But you wrote the grant applications that justified the funding. Applications that cite a critical lunch funding shortage caused by high debt levels and low on an SLP enrollment. Low enrollment that your office controls. Kemp's smile was gone now. Gentlemen, this conversation is moving into territory that requires legal counsel. I'm going to ask you to leave the building. We're standing in a public school lobby during business hours, War Chief said. We're not raising our voices. We're not blocking access. We're asking questions about federal program funding and a child who hasn't eaten a hot meal in 3 weeks. If you'd like us to leave, you're welcome to call the police. We'll wait outside and continue this conversation with them. Kemp looked at Halftone's camera, at the folder on the desk, at the receptionist whose face had gone pale. I need to make a phone call. Take your time. Kemp walked back toward his office. His stride was measured, controlled, but his shoulders were higher than they'd been when he walked in. War Chief looked at his brothers. Razorback was already on his phone, texting someone. Gravel was typing notes. Halftone adjusted his camera angle to capture the Every Student Matters poster on the wall beside the receptionist's desk. Outside, 62 motorcycles sat in silent formation. By 4 in the afternoon, 73 more would arrive from Durham. By nightfall, 191 Hells Angels would be staged at Holly Springs Town Hall, exactly 400 feet from Pinewood Elementary School's front entrance. And in the cafeteria, Emma Sullivan sat at table 14 with her uncle's hand around hers, a bread roll she still hadn't eaten, and a piece of notebook paper that said Wake County, and it doesn't exist. Words that would in exactly 16 hours unseal a settlement, trigger a federal investigation, and prove that the scariest thing a predator can face isn't violence. It's documentation. By 6:47 Wednesday morning, 191 motorcycles lined Holly Springs Town Hall's public parking lot in formation so precise it looked rehearsed. It wasn't. It was the coordinated efficiency of men who'd ridden together for years, who knew how to stage a presence without creating chaos, who understood that discipline was louder than noise. The rumble had started low, distant, like thunder building on the horizon. Then it grew, a roar that shook windows 3 blocks away and set off car alarms along Pinewood Park Drive. 191 engines, chrome gleaming in the early light, leather cuts bearing the same insignia. The sound peaked, held for exactly 7 seconds, then cut off almost in unison. The sudden silence after all that noise felt heavy, expectant. Holly Springs Police Department sent 3 units. They parked at the edge of the lot, watched the bikers dismount, watched them line up in rows without a single shout or shove, and did nothing because nothing illegal was happening. Public property, peaceful assembly, 0 threats, just presence. Now you might be thinking 191 Hells Angels show up at a school and fists start flying. Leather and chrome and rage. That's the story you've been taught to expect, isn't it? The one where bikers mean violence and case and broken windows. But what actually unfolded over the next 14 hours was something far more terrifying to a man like Randall Kemp than any thrown punch could ever be. It was procedure. War Chief stood at the front of the formation as the sun crested the tree line. Behind him, brothers from 3 chapters, 62 from Garner, 73 from Durham, 56 from Fayetteville. Some had driven through the night. One had called in sick to work for the first time in 4 years. Another had postponed his daughter's birthday party and brought her with him because she'd asked to see what protecting people looked like. Listen up, War Chief's voice carried without amplification. We are not here to intimidate. We are not here to threaten. We are here to document, to witness, and to ensure that 17 children who have been systematically denied food while their school collects federal funding are heard. Every interaction is calm. Every word is measured. Anyone who loses their temper leaves immediately. Understood. 191 voices. Understood. Razorback. What's our legal standing? Razorback stepped forward. 47 years old, former Wake County School Board attorney, the man who'd quit rather than overlook a contract irregularity and had spent the intervening years wondering if walking away had been the right choice. He wasn't wondering anymore. We're on public property. We have the right to peaceful assembly. We have the right to request public records. We have the right to file complaints with federal oversight agencies. And as of 6:15 this morning, we have the right to accompany Marcus Raines, Emma Sullivan's legal guardian, into any meeting he requests with school administration because North Carolina law permits a parent or guardian to bring an advocate to any education-related meeting. Gravel. Gravel was 54, former DSS investigator, the man who'd spent 17 years removing children from dangerous homes and had learned to spot the exact moment a system chose paperwork over safety. He'd seen that moment at Fuquay-Varina Elementary 3 years ago when his request to subpoena lunch records was denied at the supervisory level. He wasn't letting it happen again. I filed a formal request with Wake County Schools at 5:42 this morning to unseal the Marrero settlement, Fuquay-Varina Elementary, March 2022, citing new evidence of pattern behavior and public safety concern. I also contacted the USDA Office of Inspector General and requested an emergency review of NSLP funding compliance at Pinewood Elementary. That triggers a mandatory audit hold, meaning no grant applications currently under review can be approved until the OIG completes their investigation. War Chief nodded. Crowbar. Crowbar was 63, retired North Carolina State Highway Patrol, 22 years on the force. He knew every magistrate, judge, and sheriff's deputy in Wake County on a first-name basis. He'd made one phone call at 7:14 that morning. That call had done more damage to Randall Kemp's defense than any confrontation could. Spoke with Judge Morrison, explained the situation. He's issuing an order to unseal the Marrero settlement by 11:30 this morning. Says if there's pattern evidence and a current victim sealed agreements don't protect future harm. He's also putting the DA's office on notice. If we bring him probable cause for fraud, he'll fast-track the warrant. Halftone, you ready? Halftone was 36, documentary filmmaker, credentialed journalist. The moment Randall Kemp's communications coordinator realized his press credentials were legitimate, the entire institutional closing of ranks dynamic had shifted. Because ignoring concerned parents was policy, ignoring the press was career suicide. Cameras ready. I've got interviews scheduled with 3 parents whose payments disappeared. I've got Carol Weaver on record saying she was instructed not to accept corrections at the lunch line. And I've got footage of that banner in the cafeteria. Every student matters, right above the table where kids eat bread while everyone else eats hot meals. War Chief looked across the parking lot toward the school. Lights were on in the main office. A car pulled into the staff lot. Early arrival, probably a teacher. The day was starting. Then let's go to work. Donna Cresswell was 52 years old and had worked Pinewood Elementary's cafeteria for 9 years. She loved the kids, hated the policy, and 3 weeks ago, when she reported her concern about the stamping to a district compliance officer, she knew through a parent group she'd been called into Kemp's office the following Monday and told that discussing internal operational procedures with outside parties violated her employment agreement. She hadn't reported anything since. Until Razorback knocked on her apartment door at 8:17 that morning with a recorder, a witness, and a promise that her testimony would be protected. Miss Cresswell, can you describe the lunch debt stamping policy as it was explained to you? Donna sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't drunk from. Her voice was quiet but clear. Mr. Kemp implemented it in his first year here. He called it a parent communication tool, said it was just a way to remind families about outstanding balances so they'd know to check their accounts. When did you first apply the stamp? October 3 years ago. He had them ordered through the school supply vendor. Like official purchase order, not something he bought at a drugstore, came in a box of 12 red ink pads. He showed us how to do it at a staff meeting, demonstrated on his own hand. Did anyone object? Her jaw tightened. Mrs. Weaver asked if we could use a letter instead, something the kids could take home in their backpacks. Mr. Kemp said the point was immediate visibility, that parents needed to see the notification when they picked up their kids, that it was more effective than a letter that might get lost. How many children have you stamped? I stopped counting after 40, but I've seen the same kids come through week after week. Emma Sullivan, Kira Bennett, Marcus Rios. They know the routine now. They hold out their hands before I even reach for the stamp. Her voice broke. She set the mug down, pressed her palms flat against the table. I knew it was wrong. I knew it the first time I did it and saw a little boy pull his sleeve down to cover it before he walked back to his classroom. But I have a daughter in college and a mortgage, and Mr. Kemp made it very clear what happened to people who questioned his policies. Mrs. Weaver tried, got nowhere. I tried, got called in, and when I went to the compliance office, when I tried to go over his head, I got reminded that I was an hourly employee and policies came from administration, not the lunch line. Ms. Cresswell, Razorback said gently, you're not the villain in this story. I'm not the hero either. No, but you're here now, and that's what matters. Her testimony took 47 minutes. She cried twice. Halftone filmed all of it. By the time she finished, Razorback had 17 pages of notes confirmation that Kemp had purchased the stamps deliberately and a name. Sylvia Hargrove, District Nutrition Coordinator, who'd been present at the implementation meeting and had raised no objections. Pet Washington was 64, a crossing guard at Pinewood Elementary for 14 years. She'd seen 3 children eating food from their backpacks at the bus stop in February. Crackers, a bruised apple, a half sandwich wrapped in a napkin. She'd filed a written report with the front office stating that students appeared to be bringing supplemental food because they weren't eating adequately at school. She'd received no response. She'd kept her own log anyway. Force of habit from 14 years of documenting everything. Late buses, traffic incidents, weather delays. She kept everything. Gravel sat across from her in the Holly Springs Public Library at 9:30 that morning. She'd brought a spiral notebook. Dated entries, February 4th through April 1st, 17 names, times observed, what they were eating. Mrs. Washington, why did you keep this? Because something felt wrong, and I've been doing this job long enough to know that when something feels wrong and nobody listens, you'd better have proof when someone finally does. Her log became evidence, not just of the lunch policy, but of how many adults had tried to report it and been ignored. Teachers who filed concern slips that disappeared. A school nurse who documented weight loss in 3 students and been told to notify parents, not administration. A custodian who'd found uneaten bread rolls in the trash at the end of every lunch period and mentioned it to Mrs. Weaver, who'd told him to focus on his job. Dr. Gerald Vance was 44, a pediatric nurse practitioner at Holly Springs Pediatrics. He'd seen Emma Sullivan for a well-child visit on February 14th and had noted in her chart nutritional intake concerns, patient reports, inconsistent meals at school with at 51 pounds down 6 pounds since October, recommend dietary consult if weight loss continues. He hadn't known the lunch policy was the cause. Nobody had told him. But his chart note became the first independently corroborated piece of medical evidence that the stamping policy had created measurable harm. Razorback pulled his testimony at 10:15 that morning via phone. Mr. Vance, in your clinical opinion, what does a 6-pound weight loss over 5 months indicate in an otherwise healthy 8-year-old? It indicates inadequate caloric intake. At her age and activity level, she should be gaining weight, not losing it. A 6-pound loss is significant. And given that she reported the school lunch program as her primary hot meal, the connection is direct. Did you file a report? I documented it in her chart and recommended follow-up. I didn't know at the time that the issue was systematic denial of food. If I had, I would have filed a mandatory report with DSS immediately. His testimony took 9 minutes. When it ended, Razorback had medical documentation that Emma Sullivan's health had deteriorated directly as a result of the lunch policy. Documentation that would become the foundation for criminal charges, not just policy violations. At 11:30 that morning, Crowbar's phone rang. Judge Morrison's clerk. The Marrero settlement was unsealed. Gravel had it pulled and printed within 20 minutes. The brothers gathered at the town hall staging area. Razorback laid out the documents on a folding table someone had brought from the back of a truck. War Chief stood at the center. 60 brothers pressed close. The rest maintained perimeter watch, making sure no one left the school without being seen. "This is the Marrero settlement," Gravel said. March 2022. Fuquay Varina Elementary. Jalen Marrero, age 7 at the time, was enrolled in the district's at-risk student monitoring program. DSS had flagged him as potentially food insecure. The school and the principal were his primary institutional point of contact. He flipped to the second page. February 2022. Jalen's pediatrician documented moderate malnutrition. Weight 12 pounds below standard range. Filed a mandatory DSS report. DSS investigated the home. Found no abuse. Did not investigate the school. Why not, someone asked? Because Randall Kemp told them the family was non-compliant with the lunch payment system and that he'd offered resources multiple times. Blamed the parents. DSS accepted it. How did it get unsealed? Jalen's mother testified before the State Board of Education in October 2023. Her testimony wasn't entered into Kemp's personnel file, which is the specific data field that transfers with a principal across districts. The settlement was classified as Facilities and Operations Review, Settlement Fiscal Year 22 in the budget records. Nobody connected it to a child welfare case because it was never coded as one. Razorback leaned forward. How much did Wake County pay? $163,900. Silence. And Kemp transferred to Pinewood when August 2022, 5 months after the settlement, under a mutual professional development agreement, not terminated, not disciplined. 3 staff members who could have corroborated the lunch debt policy at Fuquay Varina were reassigned to different schools in the same 30-day window. War Chief's jaw was tight, so the district buried it. The district paid for it, sealed it, moved him, and never told Pinewood's administration that their new principal had presided over a child's malnutrition severe enough to warrant a 6-figure settlement. "That's not a failure," someone said quietly. "That's a system working exactly as designed." Gravel nodded. To protect itself, not the kids. At 12:40 that afternoon, an anonymous district budget analyst, identity protected at their request, contacted Razorback through a third party. They'd raised an internal query 8 months ago about the Cornerstone Kitchen Solutions invoices. Specifically that the line item costs were 40 to 60% above verified market rates for comparable equipment. They'd been transferred to a different role within 2 weeks. No explanation. Just a reassignment notice and a reminder about confidentiality agreements. They provided copies of the invoices. 3 grant cycles, 3 awards. Grant $189,400. Cornerstone invoiced $127,300. Difference $37,900. Grant 2 $114,300. Cornerstone invoiced $168,100. Difference $53,800. Grant 3 $113,700. Pending approval. Projected Cornerstone invoice $179,500. Projected difference $65,800. Total diverted across 3 cycles $157,500. Documented $223,300 projected. "How does this work?" Tank asked. He was a mechanic like Marcus. Understood equipment costs. Understood when someone was inflating a bid. Razorback pulled up a comparison sheet. Here's the market rate for a commercial 6-burner range, $4,800. Cornerstone charged $7,200. Same range, same model, 50% markup. Do that across 20 line items per grant cycle, and you're looking at an extra $50,000 to $60,000 per cycle that flows back to Darren Kemp. And where does that money go? That's what we need the FBI to answer. At 1:15 that afternoon, Special Agent Naomi Brennan from the FBI's Charlotte field office walked into the town hall parking lot. She was in plain clothes, practical jacket, boots, no badge visible, and the specific exhaustion that settles into someone's face when they've been working a case longer than they want to admit. She approached War Chief directly. "Agent Brennan, FBI, I'm told you have something relevant to an open federal investigation." War Chief didn't extend his hand. "Depends on what you're investigating." Randall Kemp, Cornerstone Kitchen Solutions, NSLP fraud. We've been building a case for 7 months. Can't move without airtight documentation. How long has your office known about Kemp? Brennan's jaw tightened. 7 months. And how long has Emma Sullivan been denied hot meals? I don't know who that is. 22 school days. We got her out of that cafeteria yesterday. You had 7 months. The silence stretched. Brennan didn't look away, didn't make excuses. We had the financial trail, she said finally. We didn't have victims willing to testify. Parents were scared. Teachers were reassigned. Every witness we approached either lawyered up or disappeared. We've been trying to build this case legally carefully by the book. And while you built it, a little girl went hungry. Yes. War Chief let that sit for 3 seconds. Then he gestured to the table. Razorback, show her what we have. Razorback laid it out in sequence. Documents placed one at a time. Marcus's payment confirmation screenshots beside Emma's account records showing -67. The suppressed NSLP applications. 47 families. The cornerstone invoices next to market rate comparisons. The unsealed Marrero settlement. The medical chart notes from Dr. Vance. Donna Creswell's testimony. P.D. Washington's log. Brennan reviewed each item. Her expression shifted. She stopped writing. Set her pen down, leaned forward. This fills a gap we haven't been able to close for 5 months. Which gap? Direct victim testimony with medical corroboration and documented pattern behavior across multiple schools. We had the money. We had the vendor fraud. What we didn't have was proof that real children were harmed as part of the scheme. Harm that Kemp knew about and perpetuated intentionally. You have it now. Brennan pulled out her phone, made a call. Her voice was clipped, professional. It's Brennan. I need a warrant package expedited. Randall Kemp, Pinewood Elementary. Fraud, wire fraud, child endangerment. I'll have probable cause to you in 90 minutes. She ended the call, looked at War Chief. I need one thing from you. Name it. Emma Sullivan gets a victim advocate assigned before we interview her, and nobody talks to her without her uncle present and without her saying yes first. Done. Brennan nodded, gathered the documents. We'll be in touch. She walked back to her car. War Chief watched her go. She's not the enemy, Greville said quietly. No, but the system she works for moves slow, and slow costs children time they don't have. She's moving now because we bought her the time to move. At 3:47 that afternoon, Randall Kemp was in his office on the phone with the district's communications coordinator, asking for approved messaging language to respond to a concerned parent group that had assembled outside the school. He didn't say bikers. He said concerned parent group, because that language sounded manageable. He was told to avoid direct engagement, refer all questions to the district, and document any interactions for legal review. He hung up, looked at his computer screen. The third grant application. $113,700. Still under review. The audit window closed in 11 days. If he could just hold the line for 11 more days, the application would be approved, the money would flow, and this would blow over the way these things always blew over. Parents got upset. Parents threatened lawsuits. Parents eventually accepted that the system had processes, and those processes took time. He'd been doing this for 3 years. He knew how it worked. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, sitting in his office at 3:47 on a Wednesday afternoon reviewing his calendar and thinking about the community garden meeting he had scheduled for 5, was that at 3:52, Judge Morrison would sign a warrant. At 4:10, Agent Brennan would arrive at Pinewood Elementary with 2 federal marshals. And at 4:14, his entire carefully constructed system would collapse into a single question that he would not be able to answer. Mr. Kemp, can you explain why 17 children in your care were systematically denied food while you collected federal funding and diverted $157,500 to a vendor owned by your brother-in-law? They found him in the parking lot. He'd left through the side entrance, walking toward his car, keys in hand, checking his phone. He looked up, saw the marshals, saw Agent Brennan. His first expression wasn't fear, it was irritation. The specific irritation of a man interrupted during a routine task. Mr. Kemp, I'm Special Agent Brennan, FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest. On what charge? Wire fraud, theft of federal funds, child endangerment, conspiracy to defraud the United States. The irritation slipped. Confusion replaced it. There's been a mistake. No, sir, there hasn't. Turn around, please. He did. Slowly. Hands came up automatically. He'd never been arrested, but he'd seen it on television on. The marshals cuffed him, read him his rights, right there in the parking lot, under the oak trees, in front of 3 teachers and a parent volunteer who'd stopped walking when they saw the suits. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Kemp wasn't listening. His mind was racing. Wire fraud, federal funds, conspiracy, those were serious. Those were prison. I need to call my attorney. You'll have access to a phone at processing. They walked him toward the unmarked car. His hands were cuffed behind his back. His Oxford shirt was wrinkled now where the marshals had gripped his arms. He looked back once. At the school, at the building he'd run for 3 years, at the community garden he'd planted, the PTA budget he'd managed, the Meals on Wheels route he drove every Tuesday. He looked like a man who couldn't understand how his Tuesday had turned into this. That was the thing about people like Randall Kemp. They never saw themselves as villains. They saw themselves as administrators, problem solvers, people who made hard decisions other people didn't have the stomach for. The children were fed, weren't they? Bread and milk. That was food. Nobody had died. Nobody had been hit. He just managed resources, followed the system, made it work. The fact that he'd made it work by turning children's hunger into a line item, that didn't register as evil. It registered as efficiency. And that belief that cruelty could be filed, documented, budgeted, was the most dangerous thing about him. The medical exam happened 3 days after Kemp's arrest. Halftone, the younger brother, 36, the one with the camera and the easy smile, drove Emma and Marcus to Holly Springs Pediatrics at 9 on Saturday morning. He didn't have to. His job was documentation, not transportation. But he'd brought a book anyway, something about a girl detective. Left it on the passenger seat when Emma got out. That's for you if you want it. She picked it up, looked at the cover. Nancy Drew, a girl who solved mysteries. A girl who asked questions and got answers. Thank you. You're welcome, kid. He waited in the lobby while Dr. Vance did the exam, sat with his back to the wall, jacket draped over the chair beside him. Phone silenced. 20 minutes passed. 30. Parents came and went with their children. A toddler cried. A mother soothed. Normal sounds. The sounds of a place where children came to be cared for, not managed. When Emma and Marcus emerged, Dr. Vance was with them. He walked them to the lobby, crouched to Emma's level. Emma, you're doing great. Your weight's already up 1.5 pounds. That's exactly what we want to see. Keep eating when you're hungry. Your body knows what it needs. When do I come back? 2 weeks, just to check in, make sure everything's moving in the right direction. He stood, looked at Halftone, then at Marcus. His voice dropped lower. Thank you for getting her here when you did. Another month like the last one, and we'd be talking about hospitalization for refeeding. You didn't just save her comfort, you saved her health. Halftone nodded once. Marcus's throat was tight. He didn't trust his voice. He just took Emma's hand and walked toward the exit. In the truck, she opened the Nancy Drew book, flipped through the pages, stopped on chapter 3. Read silently while Halftone drove. The morning sun came through the window, caught the edge of her face, showed the dark circles under her eyes starting to fade. She was still small for her age, still carrying weight she shouldn't have to carry, but her hand wasn't under the table anymore. And that was something. The first safe meal happened that night. Marcus's kitchen. Nothing fancy. Spaghetti with jarred sauce, garlic bread from the freezer section, a bagged salad he'd bought on the way home. He wasn't a great cook. He was a competent cook. There was a difference. Emma sat at the table, watched him stir the pasta, pull the bread from the oven. The smell filled the small kitchen. Garlic, butter, tomato, warmth. The smell of food made for eating, not for demonstrating scarcity. He plated it, set it in front of her, sat down across from her with his own plate. She looked at it, at the pile of spaghetti, the 2 slices of bread, the salad in a small bowl beside it. It was more food than she'd eaten at one time in weeks. You don't have to finish it, Marcus said quietly. Just eat until you're full. Whatever's left will save. She picked up her fork. Twirled spaghetti the way children do. Careful. Concentrating. Took a bite. Chewed slowly. Swallowed. Marcus ate his own food. Didn't watch her. Didn't comment. Just let the meal be a meal. No timer. No consequence. No negotiation. Halfway through, she stopped. Set her fork down. Looked at him. Uncle Marcus. Yeah, birdie girl. I'm full. Okay. I'm really full. That's good. That's exactly how it's supposed to feel. She looked at the remaining food on her plate. A third of it left, maybe more. And for the first time in 22 days, leaving food on a plate didn't mean she was ungrateful or wasteful or breaking a rule. It just meant she was full. She exhaled, long and shaky. Then she smiled, gap-toothed, both front teeth showing, and the sound she made was something between a laugh and a I forgot what this felt like. Marcus reached across the table, took her hand, didn't say anything, couldn't. His chest was too tight and his eyes were burning, and if he tried to speak right now, he'd break. So he just held her hand and let her know without words that she was safe. She was fed, and nobody was taking that away. The garlic bread sat on the counter cooling. The smell would linger in the kitchen for hours. And that was the thing about safety. Sometimes it smelled like butter and garlic. Sometimes it looked like a half-finished plate of spaghetti. Sometimes it was just the permission to stop eating when you were full. The housing solution came together over 4 days through a network Marcus hadn't known existed until War Chief made a call. A retired teacher named Margaret Hollis owned a duplex 2 miles from Emma's school. One side was rented. The other had been empty for 3 months while she waited for the right tenant. Right tenant meant someone she trusted. Someone who'd take care of the place. Someone who wouldn't disappear when rent was late. War Chief vouched for Marcus. Margaret said that was enough. The brothers helped move them in on Sunday. Tank and Steele brought a truck. Reaper brought cleaning supplies and spent 2 hours scrubbing the kitchen and bathroom. Flintlock the elder, 72, the man who'd said 4 words since arriving in Holly Springs and hadn't needed to say more, brought a toolbox and fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom sink, the sticking door on the bedroom closet, and the loose handle on the oven. The chapter had raised $9,347 through an emergency fund. Gas money, moving costs, first month's rent, security deposit, and a cushion for groceries and utilities. Razorback handed Marcus the envelope at the duplex's front door. This is from 63 brothers across 3 chapters. It's not a loan. It's not charity. It's family taking care of family. Marcus's voice was rough. I don't know how to. You don't have to. Just take care of that girl. That's the payment. By nightfall, they had furniture in place. Nothing fancy, mostly secondhand, but functional and clean. A couch, a kitchen table, 2 beds. Emma's room had a window facing east. Morning light. A small bookshelf Tank had built in his garage the night before. She stood in the doorway of her new room, backpack on the floor beside her, the Nancy Drew book in her hands, looked at the bookshelf, looked at the bed, full size, which was bigger than she'd ever had, looked at Marcus. This is mine. This is yours. Nobody's going to take it away. Nobody's going to take it away. She set the book on the shelf carefully, like she was practicing. Then she unzipped her backpack's front pocket and pulled out the spelling trophy. 4 inches tall, pale gold plastic, the proof that she'd once been a child a room had applauded. She placed it beside the book. Not hidden anymore. Just there. The brothers said goodbye in shifts. They'd been in Holly Springs for 3 days. Some had jobs to get back to, families waiting, lives that had paused but couldn't pause forever. Steele left first, the strategist, the one who'd mapped the investigation like a military operation. He crouched beside Emma on the duplex's front step. You did good, kid. You wrote that note. You trusted your uncle. That took guts. I was scared. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the thing anyway. He stood, shook Marcus's hand, and was gone. Halftone lingered at his truck, adjusting his camera bag, clearly stalling. Finally turned back. Marcus, I'm going to send you the footage. All of it. Not just what makes the documentary, everything. Emma's testimony, the cafeteria, the arrest, you should have it in case she ever wants to see proof that people showed up. She knows people showed up. Yeah, but someday she might need to be reminded. We all do. He pulled a business card from his wallet, wrote his personal cell number on the back, handed it to Emma. Anytime, I mean it, you need something, you call. She took the card, held it carefully. Thank you for the book. Read it twice. Nancy's good at this stuff. Reaper was last. The medic, the one who'd checked Emma's vitals the first night, gentle and thorough, and had quietly flagged to Marcus that her blood pressure was low and her hands were cold, signs of a body under stress. He didn't crouch. He sat on the step beside her, elbows on his knees, looking out at the quiet street. Your uncle's a good man, but if he ever needs backup, if something happens and you need help and you can't reach him, you call War Chief. Number's in your uncle's phone. We don't leave people behind. You're part of this now. Emma looked at him, at the patches on his vest, the gray in his beard, the hands that had checked her pulse and told her she was going to be okay. Are you really a bad guy? He smiled, slow and sad. Some people think so, but the people who matter know different. Remember that, kid? What people think you are and what you actually are, those are two different things, and only one of them matters. He stood, nodded to Marcus, got on his bike, and rode out. By sunset, the parking lot was empty. The rumble was gone. Holly Springs looked like Holly Springs again. Quiet streets, trimmed lawns, families eating dinner behind closed doors. But Pinewood Elementary would never look the same, because 191 people had decided it shouldn't. 6 weeks after Randall Kemp's arrest, Marcus stood in the parking lot of Holly Springs Pediatrics at 7:20 on a Thursday evening. He wasn't supposed to be there. Emma's appointment had been at 4. He'd dropped her off, gone back to work, finished a transmission rebuild, picked her up at 5:15. They'd gone home. She'd done homework. He'd made dinner. Normal, except he'd left his jacket in the waiting room. And when he came back to get it, he found Dr. Vance locking up for the night. Marcus, forget something. Yeah, jacket, sorry. Vance unlocked the door, let him in, flipped the lights back on. The waiting room was empty, chairs lined up, magazines stacked, the smell of antiseptic and air freshener. Marcus grabbed his jacket from the coat rack, turned to leave, stopped. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you saw her that first time, February, when you wrote that note in her chart about nutritional concerns, did you know? Vance was quiet for a moment. Did I know someone was starving her on purpose? No. Did I know something was wrong? Yes, and I documented it, and I told myself that was enough. You couldn't have known. I could have asked better questions, could have pushed harder, could have filed a report instead of just noting a concern, but I didn't. Because filing a report meant involving DSS, and involving DSS meant accusing someone. And accusing someone meant I had to be sure, so I chose careful over urgent. That's not on you. No, but it's with Mauricio. Vance looked at the empty waiting room. I see a lot of kids. Most of them are fine. Some of them aren't. And the ones who aren't, they're usually not fine in ways that are easy to see. Bruises, breaks, things I'm trained to spot. But a kid slowly losing weight because her school is withholding food while collecting federal money. That's a different kind of harm. Quieter, more bureaucratic. And I almost missed it. Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. She's doing better now, Vance said. Weight's up 3.5 pounds. Color's better. She's sleeping. That's all moving in the right direction. You got her out in time. We got her out. Vance smiled, tired, grateful. Yeah, we did. Marcus left, drove home through quiet streets, pulled into the duplex's driveway, sat in the truck for a long moment with the engine off. Hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. He'd done the thing he'd come to do. He'd kept Emma safe. He'd called his brothers and they'd answered, and together they'd stopped something that shouldn't have been allowed to exist. But there was a folder on his phone now labeled, Why We Ride. Messages from strangers whose families had been saved. Parents who'd heard what happened in Holly Springs and reached out to say thank you, to say me too, to say I thought I was the only one. He opened the folder, scrolled past the messages he'd already read, found a new one sent 2 hours ago. My son's school was doing the same thing. Lunch debt letters, public shaming. We tried to fight it, nobody listened. Then we showed them what happened in North Carolina. Showed them the news coverage. Showed them 191 bikers standing in a parking lot because 17 kids were hungry. The policy changed in 3 days. I don't know your name, but thank you. You saved more than one kid. Marcus closed the folder, locked his phone, went inside. Emma was at the kitchen table. Nancy drew book open, spelling words written in careful print on notebook paper. She looked up when he walked in. Uncle Marcus, how do you spell justice? He spelled it, watched her write it down, watched her underline it twice. That's for my vocabulary test tomorrow. Miss Aldridge says we have to use it in a sentence. What sentence are you going to use? She thought about it, pencil tapping against the paper. Then she wrote slow and careful. Justice is when someone helps, even if it's hard. Marcus read it over her shoulder. His throat went tight. That's a good sentence, Birdie girl. You think I'll get it right? Think you already did. 11 months later, Emma Sullivan stood at the front of the Pinewood Elementary cafeteria during a district-wide assembly on student advocacy and nutrition security. She was 9 now, 4'3", 61 pounds, on the honor roll every semester since the previous spring. She'd been asked to speak, not by the school. The school had a new principal now, a woman named Dr. Sharon Reeves who had spent her first week on the job personally reviewing every lunch account and issuing refunds for unprocessed payments, but by a state representative who'd read about Holly Springs and wanted to understand how a child navigated a system designed to silence her. Emma had said yes, on one condition. She got to write her own speech. So she stood there at a podium adjusted down to her height, looking out at 340 students and 73 adults, and spoke in a voice that didn't shake. My name is Emma Sullivan. Last year I went 22 days without a hot lunch at this school. Not because my family couldn't pay. They paid twice. But the system didn't work. And when I tried to tell adults what was happening, the system said there was a process. And the process took longer than I had. She paused, glanced at her note card. She'd written it herself, practiced it with Miss Aldridge, and refused to let anyone edit it. I wrote a note. I didn't understand what it meant, but I knew it was important. So I gave it to my uncle. And he didn't tell me there was a process. He didn't tell me to wait. He just believed me. And then he called people who believed him. And they came. Another pause. She found Marcus in the audience. Second row, vest on, arms crossed, jaw tight because his niece was talking about the worst thing that had happened to her, and he couldn't fix it from happening, only from continuing. I don't think I'm supposed to say this part, Emma said, but I'm going to anyway. The system didn't save me. People did. And those people looked scary to some of the adults here. But they weren't scary to me. Because scary is being hungry in a room full of food and being told you can't have any. Scary is being stamped like you're a problem. Scary is telling adults something's wrong and being told to wait 30 days while you're still hungry. She looked at Dr. Reeves, at the district superintendent sitting in the front row, at the school board members who'd come because this was good publicity. Now, the reformed district, the transparent process, the lessons learned. So if you want to know how to help kids like me, here's how. Listen the first time. Don't make us prove we're worth helping. Don't make us wait for the paperwork. Just listen. And if you can't help right away, call someone who can. She stepped back from the podium. The cafeteria was silent. Then Miss Aldridge started clapping. Then the students joined. Then the adults had no choice. Emma walked back to her seat. Marcus reached out, squeezed her shoulder once as she passed. She didn't look at him. Just took her seat beside Kira Bennett, the girl whose mother had paid in November and whose daughter still got stamped and folded her hands in her lap like she hadn't just told an entire room of administrators that their system had failed and ordinary people had succeeded. After the assembly, a woman approached Marcus in the hallway, mid-30s, nervous, holding a little boy's hand. "Excuse me, are you Emma's uncle?" "I am. I just wanted to say thank you. My son goes to a different school, different district, but they had a lunch shaming policy too. After what happened here, parents started asking questions, started demanding accountability. The policy changed because of what you did, because people saw that someone fought back and won. The little boy looked up at Marcus, at his vest, at the patches. "Are you a superhero?" Marcus crouched, eye level. "No, buddy, I'm just an uncle. My teacher says superheroes help people. Then I guess a lot of mobs people are superheroes. You don't need a cape, you just need to show up." The boy thought about this, nodded seriously. His mother smiled, eyes wet, and led him away. Marcus stood, looked at the cafeteria doors, at the banner. "Replace now." Same message. "Every student matters," and wondered how many people had walked past that banner last year and believed it while children ate bread at the edges of the room. Belief was easy. Action was harder. 3 years and 2 months after Randall Kemp's arrest, Emma Sullivan sat in the Wake County Social Services office at age 12, across from a girl named Mara, who was 10 and shaking and refusing to talk to the intake coordinator because every adult Mara had ever trusted had either failed her or betrayed her, and she was done trusting. Emma had volunteered with the Peer Advocate Program for 6 months. It was a pilot initiative pairing kids who'd survived system failures with kids currently navigating those systems. The theory was that sometimes children trusted other children in ways they couldn't trust adults. The theory was working. Emma had asked to meet with Mara after reading her case file: foster placement, lunch debt at her previous school, a note in the file from a teacher who tried to report neglect and been told to document concerns through proper channels. Proper channels that moved slowly while Mara moved through 3 placements in 8 months. Emma knew that story, knew the shape of it, knew what it felt like from the inside. She sat beside Mara, not across, beside, and didn't ask questions. Just pulled out a worn copy of Nancy Drew and started reading out loud, casually, like she had nothing better to do. Mara listened, didn't look at her, but listened. After 3 pages, Emma stopped, closed the book. "You ever feel like nobody's listening?" Mara's jaw tightened. "All the time." "Yeah, me too. For a long time I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't saying it right. Maybe I needed to wait my turn. Then someone told me that waiting is what people tell you to do when they don't want to act right now." Mara looked at her. First time, eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "What did you do?" "I told someone who didn't make me wait, and he called people who didn't make him wait, and they showed up, same day." "Who was it?" "My uncle and his friends, a lot of his friends." "Were they social workers?" "No, they were bikers." Mara blinked. "Like motorcycles." "Like motorcycles, leather vests, Hell's Angels patches. The kind of people who look scary but aren't. Not to kids." "Why'd they help you?" "Because I asked. And because they believe kids shouldn't have to wait for adults to finish their paperwork before they get help." Mara was quiet for a long time. Then so quietly Emma almost missed it. "I'm tired of waiting." "I know, that's why I'm here. I'm not a social worker. I can't change your placement. I can't fix the system. But I can sit here and I can listen. And if you tell me something's wrong, I believe you. First time, no waiting." Mara's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. "My foster dad takes the food money, the lunch account money. He says I'm eating him out of house and home, but he won't put money in the account. The school keeps sending letters, but he throws them away. I haven't had a hot lunch in 5 weeks. Emma didn't react, didn't gasp, didn't look shocked. Just reached into her backpack and pulled out a small notebook and a pen. "Okay, what's his name? And what's the school's name?" Mara told her. Emma wrote it down. Then she pulled out her phone, the one Marcus had given her when she started middle school, and scrolled to a contact, hit call, put it on speaker. The line rang twice. "Birdie girl, everything okay? Uncle Marcus, I need you to listen to something." She slid the phone across the table to Mara, nodded. "Go ahead." Mara looked at the phone, at Emma, at the open notebook with her foster father's name written in careful print, and she talked. Marcus Raines sat in his truck at 9:47 on a Friday night, parked outside the duplex he'd lived in for 3 years, phone in his hand, listening to a 10-year-old girl he'd never met describe a situation he had heard before. When she finished, he closed his eyes, took a breath. "Mara, my name's Marcus. I'm Emma's uncle, and I'm going to make sure the people who need to hear what you just said hear it tonight. Okay, okay, you're going to be all right. Emma's going to stay with you until someone safe shows up. And someone safe is going to show up. That's a promise. He ended the call, sat in the dark truck for 10 seconds. Then he scrolled to another contact. Hit call. War Chief, it's Tombstone. Talk to me. I need 3 brothers and a DSS supervisor with override authority at the Wake County Social Services Office. Now, we got a 10-year-old girl whose foster placement is diverting her lunch money. She's gone 5 weeks without food at school. Emma's with her. I'm 15 minutes out. Give me the address. We'll be there in 20. The line went dead. Marcus started the engine, pulled onto the road. The speedometer climbed, not reckless, just fast enough. He'd thought the work was done. He'd thought Kemp's arrest and the policy change and the district reforms meant it was over. But it wasn't over. It would never be over, because systems move slowly and children needed help now. And the gap between those two realities was where kids like Mara fell through. Unless someone stood in the gap, unless someone decided that paperwork didn't matter more than a child's next meal, unless someone showed up. He pulled into the social services parking lot at 10:04. 2 motorcycles were already there. War Chief's truck, a DSS supervisor's sedan. Marcus got out, walked toward the building. The automatic doors slid open. Inside, Emma sat beside Mara. Nancy drew book open between them, reading out loud like nothing in the world was wrong, like she had all the time in the world, like Mara was worth waiting for. She looked up when Marcus walked in, smiled, not because everything was fixed, because she knew he'd come. Uncle Marcus, this is Mara. Marcus knelt, eye level with the 10-year-old girl whose hands were shaking and whose eyes were too old for her face. Hey, Mara, you did good. You told someone. That took guts. Is someone really coming? Someone's already here. You're looking at them. 3 brothers walked through the doors behind him. The DSS supervisor was making calls, voice clipped and professional, overriding protocols that said midnight interventions required manager approval. War Chief stood at the reception desk, arms crossed, a wall of leather and patience, and Emma reached over, took Mara's hand, and squeezed once. See, I told you, same day. The thing about Marcus Raines was this. He'd lost his own children to a system that decided his vest told the whole story. He'd spent 3 years being exactly who he'd always been, while a family court ruling sat on his chest like something he couldn't put down. He'd learned to be careful, to follow the rules, to prove over and over that he was safe. And then Emma had needed him. And all that careful disappeared. Because when it came down to it, the choice was simple. He could protect his own standing in a system that didn't trust him. Or he could protect a child who did. He chose the child. He'd choose the child every time. Now standing in the social services lobby at 10:17 on a Friday night, watching his niece read to a girl she just met, watching his brothers fill the space with the same quiet presence they'd brought to Holly Springs 3 years ago, he understood something he hadn't understood in that cafeteria. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't a story with an ending. This was what the rest of his life looked like. And he was okay with that. This story isn't about bikers or patches or the specific mechanics of federal lunch fraud. It's about what happens when a system asks a child to wait and someone says no. It's about the fact that Emma Sullivan's hunger wasn't an oversight. It was a line item. The stamp on her hand wasn't a reminder. It was a measurement instrument that documented needs so a grant application could justify a fraudulent vendor contract. Randall Kemp didn't hate those children. He needed them hungry enough to be useful. And that's not better. It's worse. Because hatred at least requires you to notice the person. What Kemp required was only that they remain measurably insufficient, small enough to be a number, visible enough to be evidence, silent enough to be manageable. The most corrosive institutional abuse is the kind that can be filed, the kind that has a budget code, the kind that looks like administration. And the only defense against it is people who refuse to wait for the paperwork to approve their compassion. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told there's a process when what you needed was a person, this story is for you. If you've ever been the one who looked away because it wasn't your problem, because someone else would handle it, because you didn't want to make things worse, this story is also for you. Because here's the truth. You don't need 191 motorcycles to change a story. You need one person who listens the first time. One person who believes a child over a principal. One person who calls someone else and says, I need help, and actually gets it. Protecting a child doesn't require a title. It requires a decision. And that decision doesn't look like what you've been taught to expect. It doesn't look like a courtroom or a social worker or a policy change, though those things matter, and they came. It looks like a man kneeling beside a cafeteria table. It looks like a phone call that lasts 11 seconds. It looks like 191 engines going silent all at once because the loudest thing in the room was supposed to be the children who'd been quiet for too long. Emma Sullivan is 13 now. She makes honor roll. She volunteers at social services. She reads Nancy Drew to kids who've learned not to trust adults. And she keeps her spelling trophy on her bookshelf where anyone who walks into her room can see it. Not because she needs proof anymore, because she wants other kids to know that someone somewhere once decided she was worth applauding, and that the people who decided that didn't need permission. They just needed her to ask. The cafeteria at Pinewood Elementary still has that banner. Every student matters. And now, for the first time in 4 years, the kids eating there believe it, because 191 people showed them it was true. Marcus's phone rang at 11:32 on a Thursday night, 3 months after Mara's case closed. Unfamiliar number. North Carolina area code. He almost didn't answer, but something in the timing made him pick up. This is Marcus, a woman's voice, hesitant, tired. Mr. Raines, my name is Patricia Kendrick. I got your number from a parent in Raleigh. I hope that's okay. I'm calling because my daughter's school, they're doing the same thing, the stamping, the debt. She's been eating crackers from home for 6 weeks because they won't let her get hot lunch even though I paid. And I called the district and they gave me a form and I don't know what to do and someone told me you might. Marcus sat up, reached for the pen on his nightstand. Ms. Kendrick, what's your daughter's name? Riley, she's 7. And what's the school's name? Brookfield Elementary. It's in Durham. Okay, I need you to do 3 things for me. First, take a picture of that stamp if she still has it. Second, find those payment confirmations if you have them. Third, don't fill out that form. You understand, don't touch that form. But they said, I know what they said, and what they said is designed to make you wait until it's too late to matter. You're not waiting, not anymore. He heard her breath catch. What do I do? You're going to meet me at Brookfield Elementary tomorrow morning at 8. Bring everything you have, payment records, emails, photos, and Ms. Kendrick. Yes, bring Riley. She's going to eat breakfast there tomorrow. Hot breakfast. And if anyone tries to stop her, they're going to have to explain why to about 60 people who don't think that's acceptable. Silence on the line. Then her voice smaller. You'd do that? Ma'am, I've done it before, and I'll keep doing it until schools stop treating children like budget problems. He hung up, looked at the clock. 11:34. He scrolled to War Chief's number. Hit call. Tombstone, talk to me. Durham, Brookfield Elementary, 7-year-old girl, same pattern, parent paid, money disappeared, kids been eating crackers for 6 weeks. Schools gave the 30-day form. When? Tomorrow morning, 8. How many brothers you want? Marcus thought about it, about the message this needed to send, about the fact that Patricia Kendrick's call meant the word was spreading, meant parents were learning they didn't have to accept the process, meant the work they'd started in Holly Springs was becoming something bigger. Enough to fill the parking lot, enough so that when the principal looks out his window, he knows exactly what he's dealing with. Done, I'll make calls. Anything else? Yeah, find out if Durham's got a razorback, someone who knows school board policy inside out, someone who quit because they wouldn't bend. On it. The line went dead. Marcus set the phone down, looked at the ceiling. Emma was asleep in her room. Nancy Drew on her nightstand, spelling trophy on the shelf catching streetlight through the window. She had school in the morning. Math test, she'd been studying all week. But if he knew his niece, and he did, she'd want to be at Brookfield tomorrow. Would want to sit with Riley the way someone had once sat with her. He'd ask her in the morning. For now, he closed his eyes and thought about a 7-year-old girl eating crackers because a system had decided her hunger was less important than its timeline. And he thought about 60 motorcycles pulling into a school parking lot at dawn. And he thought about how many more calls, like Patricia Kendrick's, were coming. And he was okay with that too, because this was the work now. Not one rescue, not one investigation, not one child saved, and the rest filed away as someone else's problem. This was every child, every call, every parent who'd been told to wait and decided they wouldn't. This was a phone that rang at 11:32 on a Thursday night and would keep ringing because people had learned that someone would answer. And Marcus Raines would keep answering. Because that's what you did when a child was hungry and the system said, wait. You said no. You made a call. You showed up. Every single time. The sun came up over Brookfield Elementary at 7:43 on Friday morning. By 7:56, motorcycles lined the visitor parking lot in formation that looked like it had been there for hours. By 8:04, Patricia Kendrick walked through the front doors with her daughter Riley's hand in hers, and Marcus Raines at her side, and 5 brothers fanned out behind them carrying folders and cameras and the specific gravity of people who'd done this before and knew exactly how it ended. The receptionist looked up, looked at the vests, looked at the parking lot through the window, reached for the phone, and Marcus said very quietly, before you make that call, you should know that we're here because Riley Kendrick has been denied hot meals for 6 weeks despite her mother's confirmed payment. And we'd like to speak with the principal about why the same pattern that resulted in federal charges at Pinewood Elementary appears to be happening here. The receptionist's hand froze halfway to the receiver. I'll get him. Thank you. They waited. Riley stood close to her mother, 7 years old, brown hair and pigtails, backpack with a unicorn patch, eyes that had learned to appear disappointment. Emma knelt beside her. Hey, I'm Emma. You like Nancy Drew? Riley nodded. Me too. You know what Nancy Drew's really good at? Riley shook her head. Asking questions and not stopping until she gets answers. You're really good at that too. You know how Tom, because you're here and that means you asked your mom for help and she asked other people. And now we're all here asking the same question, which is why are you hungry when you shouldn't be? The principal arrived 6 minutes later. His name was Douglas Whitmore, mid-50s, gray suit, expensive watch, the practiced smile of someone who'd navigated difficult conversations before. The smile faltered when he saw the vests. Good morning. I'm Principal Whitmore. How can I help you? Marcus stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, my name is Marcus Raines. This is Patricia Kendrick and her daughter Riley. Riley hasn't had a hot meal at this school in 6 weeks despite Mrs. Kendrick's confirmed payment of $43 through your district portal. We'd like to understand why. Whitmore's expression shifted, professional concern replacing the smile. I'm not personally familiar with individual account situations. Those are managed through our central office. If there's a payment processing issue, there's a pattern, Razorback said. He'd driven up from Holly Springs. Former school board attorney who'd quit Durham County 3 years ago when they'd asked him to sign off on something he couldn't justify. This is the 4th complaint we have received from parents at this school in the past 2 months, all describing the same thing. Payment submitted, payment confirmed, child denied meals, 30-day review form issued. Does that sound familiar? Whitmore's jaw tightened. I don't have access to those records here. You'd need to contact. We did, Patricia Kendrick said. Her voice was shaking but clear. I contacted the support line 3 times. They told me there was a process. They told me to fill out the form. They told me it would take 30 days to review. And meanwhile, my daughter is eating crackers from home because your cafeteria won't feed her food I already paid for. Ms. Kendrick, I understand your frustration, but there are procedures. Your procedures, Marcus said quietly, resulted in federal charges against a principal in Wake County 2 months ago. Wire fraud, theft of federal funds, child endangerment. He's awaiting trial. The pattern there was identical to what's happening here. Would you like to explain why? The hallway went very quiet. A teacher walked past, stopped, looked at the group, kept walking. Whitmore's hands were still at his sides. I'm going to need to consult with district administration before Bubom. That's fine, War Chief said. We'll wait. We've got all day. We've also got 62 witnesses outside, 3 parents willing to testify medical documentation of weight loss in 2 students and a direct line to the FBI agent who handled the Pinewood case. So take your time, make your calls, and when you're ready to talk about why children at this school are being systematically denied food while you collect federal funding, we'll be right here. Whitmore looked at the folders, at the cameras, at Riley standing close to her mother with her unicorn backpack and her 2 old eyes. I need to make some calls. We understand, we'll be in the lobby. He walked away. Marcus looked down at Riley. You hungry? She nodded. Then let's go to the cafeteria, because you're eating breakfast here this morning. Hot breakfast. And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. They walked to the cafeteria. Patricia, Riley, Marcus, Emma. 5 brothers fanned out behind them. The cafeteria supervisor saw them coming. Saw the vests, saw Riley. Started to say something. Marcus held up his phone. Payment confirmation visible on the screen. $43. Confirmed. Dated 6 weeks ago. Riley Kendrick is eating breakfast. Hot breakfast. Her account shows a confirmed payment of $43 that your system failed to process. If you have concerns about that, you can address them with Principal Whitmore. But this child is not eating crackers today. Are we clear? The supervisor looked at Riley, at Patricia, at the line of leather and chrome and absolute certainty behind them. She can get in line. Riley got in line, got a tray, got eggs and toast and fruit and orange juice, sat at a table with her mother and Emma, and ate, slowly at first, like she was waiting for someone to take it away. Then faster when she realized no one would. Patricia Kendrick cried into her coffee. Emma read Nancy Drew out loud while Riley ate, and Marcus stood at the cafeteria entrance with his brothers and watched a 7-year-old girl eat breakfast and thought about how many more schools there were, how many more Rileys, how many more calls at 11:32 at night. And he thought about the folder on his phone getting heavier. Messages from parents who'd heard what happened in Holly Springs, what happened in Durham. Parents who were learning they didn't have to accept the process. And he thought about how this wasn't sustainable, how he couldn't be everywhere, how 60 brothers couldn't cover every school in North Carolina where children were being turned into line items. But he also thought about Emma, about how she'd gone from the child who needed saving to the child who sat with Riley and read her Nancy Drew and showed her what it looked like when someone didn't make you wait. And he thought about the peer advocate program at Wake County, about how Emma was training other kids who'd survived the system to help kids still trapped in it. And he thought about how maybe that was the answer, not one man with a vest and a phone, but a network. Parents, advocates, former teachers who'd quit rather than comply, former administrators who'd walked away when they were asked to look the other way, kids who'd survived and wanted to make sure no one else had to, a network that moved faster than the system because it didn't wait for approval. By 9:30 that morning, Principal Whitmore had confirmed that Riley's payment would be applied immediately, that her account would be reviewed, that the district would investigate why the payment hadn't processed. By 10:15, Razorback had filed a formal complaint with the USDA Office of Inspector General requesting an audit of Durham County's NSLP compliance. By 11, Halftone had footage of Riley eating breakfast, Patricia's testimony, and the cafeteria supervisor's initial refusal to serve the child despite confirmed payment. By noon, the local news had picked up the story. By 6 that evening, 3 more parents from 3 more Durham schools had called Marcus's number. And by 9 that night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with Emma doing homework across from him and War Chief on speakerphone and a legal pad covered in notes about how to build something that could scale. We need a fund, War Chief said. Legal defense for parents, emergency support for families, something that moves faster than the system. We need documentation protocols, Razorback added. He was on the call too. Templates for complaints, know your rights information. Ways for parents to gather evidence before they even call us. We need a hotline, Marcus said. A number parents can call. Someone who answers 24/7 and knows what questions to ask. We need to train advocates, Emma said quietly. Everyone went silent. She looked up from her homework. Like the peer advocate program, but not just for kids, for parents too, for teachers who see something wrong but don't know what to do. Train them, give them tools, so they don't have to wait for you to show up. They can start fixing it themselves. Marcus looked at his niece, 13 years old, Homework spread across the table. Nancy drew bookmark in her textbook. And the clearest understanding of what this needed to become that anyone in the conversation had articulated. Bertie's right, War Chief said. We can't be everywhere, but we can teach people how to do what we did. Document, escalate, apply pressure. Most parents don't know they have power. They just need someone to show them how to use it. So we build it, Marcus said. The fund, the hotline, the training program. We build a system that works faster than the one that's failing these kids. What do we call it? Razorback asked. Marcus thought about it. About Emma at table 14 with her hand under the table. About Riley eating crackers for 6 weeks. About Mara in foster care with a lunch account being stolen. About every child who'd been told to wait while the system processed their paperwork and their hunger. Every student matters, he said, because that banner hangs in every cafeteria in this state, and it's time someone made it true. Every student matters, Warchie repeated. I like it. Me too, Emma said. And just like that, in a kitchen in Holly Springs at 9:15 on a Friday night with homework on the table, and a phone on speaker, and a 13-year-old girl who understood power better than most adults ever would, they built something new. Not a replacement for the system, a check on it. A way for parents and teachers and advocates and kids to push back when the system said wait and a child needed help now. Within 6 months, every Student Matters had a functioning hotline staffed by volunteers. Within a year, they'd trained 240 advocates across North Carolina. Within 18 months, they'd prevented lunch shaming policies at 43 schools and forced the reversal of 37 more. Within 2 years, state legislation passed requiring same-day resolution of payment disputes and prohibiting any form of public identification of students with lunch debt. The bill was called Emma's Law. Emma Sullivan, age 14, stood in the State House gallery the day it passed and watched legislators vote yes and thought about Table 14 and bread rolls and a hand stamped with red ink. And she thought about how many kids wouldn't have to hide their hands anymore. Marcus stood beside her, vest on, phone in his pocket with 47 unread messages from parents who'd heard about the law and wanted to say thank you. You did this, he said quietly. We did this, Emma corrected. You made the first call. I just wrote the note. You wrote more than a note, Birdie girl. You wrote the blueprint. She smiled, gap-toothed still, braces now, growing into herself in ways that made Margaret proud wherever she was. Uncle Marcus, yeah, the phone's going to keep ringing. I know. And we're going to keep answering. I know that too. Good. She pulled out her own phone, the one that now had the Every Student Matters hotline forwarded to it during school hours. Checked her messages. 3 new voicemails. I've got homework, she said, but after that I need to call someone back, a girl in Wilmington. Her school's doing the stamping thing. She wants to know what to do. What are you going to tell her? Emma thought about it, about everything she'd learned, about documentation and escalation, and the fact that systems move slowly but people didn't have to, about the power of one phone call, one person who listened, one decision to say no when the answer should have been yes. I'm going to tell her she doesn't have to wait, Emma said, and then I'm going to show her how. Marcus nodded, watched his niece walk out of the gallery with her phone in her hand and her backpack over her shoulder, and the absolute certainty of someone who'd learned that protecting people didn't require a title or a badge or permission from anyone. It just required a decision and the willingness to answer when someone called. The cafeteria at Pinewood Elementary still has that banner. Every student matters. But now it's true, because a network of parents and teachers and advocates and kids who survived decided it should be, because they didn't wait for someone else to fix it. Because when the system said 30 days and a child was hungry, they said no. And they showed up every single time. And that more than any law or policy or reform is what changed everything. Not the rules, the people who refused to follow rules that hurt children. Not the system, the ones who built something better beside it. Not the process, the ones who answered the phone at 11:32 on a Thursday night and said, I'm listening. Tell me what you need. Emma Sullivan is 15 now. She runs the youth division of Every Student Matters. She trains peer advocates in 12 counties. She's testified before 3 school boards and 1 congressional subcommittee. She still makes honor roll. She still reads Nancy Drew, and she still keeps that spelling trophy on her shelf. Not because she needs it, because every child who walks into her room and sees it needs to know that someone once decided she mattered. And that decision didn't come from a policy. It came from her uncle making a phone call and 191 people showing up, and a system that said, wait, meeting people who said no. That's the story, not about bikers or fraud or federal investigations, about what happens when one person listens and decides that a child's hunger matters more than a process, and calls someone who agrees, and that someone calls someone else. And before you know it, 62 motorcycles are parked in a school lot, and a 7-year-old is eating breakfast, and a network is forming that will save thousands of children because one girl wrote a note in purple gel pen and trusted her uncle enough to show him. That's power, not in systems, in people who refuse to let systems fail children, in phone calls made at midnight, in breakfast served despite policy, in every student mattering because someone decided they would, and in the ringing phone that Marcus Raines still answers, every single time, because the work isn't done. It never will be, but it's work worth doing, and he's not doing it alone anymore. None of them are.